Thanks, everybody. Do we have the clicker at the podium or back there?
Should be up
Here?
there.
All right, so thanks for coming, everybody. This is the third year that I've been to the symposium, and the crowd grows every year, which is exciting. I am a victim advocate with the Colorado Springs Police Department, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what we do as victim advocates in general, and then a little bit about what we do specifically with folks who are in or have been in a human trafficking type situation. All right, so what is a victim advocate? What is victim advocacy? And when I'm feeling a little sarcastic when someone asks me what I do for a living, I tell them that I give out hugs and information for a living. And so, I mean, it's not too far off, oddly enough. So on the hug side, we have crisis intervention. Okay, so crisis intervention is a couple of different things. Typically, when we see folks, we see them on what may be the worst day of their life so far, or a part of one of the worst times in their lives so far, and they may or may not be happy to see either law enforcement or a victim advocate, and that's okay, because we're going to be there in whatever they want, in whatever way they want us, either way. So what we're there to do is to support them and empower them to help make the decisions that they want to make to move forward from the situation that they're in. So one of the things that we do when we go out and see people in the public is active listening as a part of crisis intervention. And there's probably a better way to describe it, but the way that I think of active listening when I'm working with a person is devoting 100% of my attention, or as close to that as humanly possible, to the person that's talking to me. Because they may not have had a person listen to them before or recently, so it's very important to pay attention to what they have to say, and not, well, I need to talk to them about safe housing, I need to talk to them about TESA. Yes, I do, but I need to listen to them first, and then we can talk about that afterwards. So, as a part of crisis intervention, one of the things that we do also is we listen to and we give credence to the questions and concerns that people have. So not everyone is really familiar with the criminal justice system, the way the police department works. So we're there to answer questions that they might have and concerns. Why haven't I heard back from Detective so-and-so? What's going on with the case? What's going to happen now? What's going to happen if they make bond? Just keeping them in the loop, keeping them as informed as possible, again, to empower them to make the decisions that they want to make. And in different situations that we work with, using the example of domestic violence for the sake of an example, that decision might be that they're going to go back to the person who is abusing them. So what we will do with that is we have no right to tell them, no, you can't go back to that person. That's their choice. But we do try and arm them with as much information as we possibly can for how that they can plan for their safety, how they can, when and if they do make that decision, to get out of that situation, what they can do to do that. Another important part of crisis intervention, and when we're working with folks who have been the victim of a violent crime, is to be non-judgmental. So when you're working with a person, and we'll see a little bit more about this later when we are talking specifically about incidences of human trafficking, being non-judgmental is very important. You need to meet that person where they are. Again, you can't empower someone to move forward if you're telling them you shouldn't live your life that way, you shouldn't be doing this, this is wrong, you need to stop doing this. Because that also gets very close, unfortunately, to what can be called victim blaming, which is very important not to do. And one thing that I've noticed is that, again, I'm going to lean on some of the presentations that we've already had today, because I've heard some very good points when we're talking about the oldest form of oppression, when we're talking about sex trafficking. Again, it's nothing that's new to human society, to human history. We're just viewing it in a different way. And so victim blaming is very common where you're talking about people who have been the victims of violent crime. It's very, very common when you're talking about people who have been in a sex trafficking situation. So a couple of notes on the terminology that I'm going to use today. I am a terminology geek, if you will. When I was working with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking, I was very attuned to the terminology that I use to refer to other people. And so you will hear me use the word victim today. And it's a word that, as a victim advocate, it actually took a little bit of adjusting to using that word. I want to make sure that you know that when I use that word victim, I'm not referring to a person's identity as being a victim. There are people, perhaps, that will take on the identity of a victim themselves, sort of a victim mentality. I would argue that the vast majority of people who have been the victim of a violent crime that I work with do not take on that identity. And so the criminal justice system uses that word victim to identify a person's role in an event, a criminal event. They talk about suspects, witnesses, and victims primarily when we're talking about someone's role in a criminal event. So that's the context that I'm using it in. It's also something that as victim advocates we have to be very mindful of the way that we use the word victim when we're talking to a person who has been the victim of a violent crime. Because calling a person a victim, particularly when you're talking about the cases of human trafficking, can shut someone down very quickly. Number one, it's disempowering. Number two, they may not see themselves as a person who has been the victim of anything. So again, empowering people, we're doing crisis intervention. The other side of things, sorry, I'm getting got a little lost there for a second, apologize. So we talk about the HUD side, that's crisis intervention. Let's talk about the information side. So information, primarily what that means for me is connecting people to resources. And resources can be a few different things. When we're talking about someone's primary needs after they've experienced what may have been the most traumatic experience of their life, their needs can be many and they can be varied. So connecting people with resources and helping them to meet those primary needs, personal safety, food, clothing, shelter, that can run the entire gamut. That could be bringing someone a gas can so that they can get just enough gas in their car to drive to the gas station so that we can fill up their tank and they can drive to a safe house somewhere. That could be getting diapers or helping someone to get diapers for their children. It runs the gamut. But when we're also talking about helping people to connect with resources, we're also talking about helping them connect to individuals that are in their life that can help them, that are already in place. That could be a family member, that could be a friend, that could be a counselor, a caseworker, any number of people, helping them to identify those people that will help them in this situation as they're moving forward. And hopefully becoming one of those people that they can rely on and that they can call if they need advice, if they don't know where to turn to. So another thing that we help people process through is their reactions to going through a violent experience. So I will use the example of a bank robbery. And yes, we do have bank robberies in Colorado Springs. When we go to a bank that has been robbed, you will see the wide variety of reactions that people have to a traumatic experience. And it can, again, it can run the gamut. That could be anything from being hysterically emotional, crying, just letting everything out. It could be completely shutting down and being numb, or it could be laughing, It runs the gamut. And what it's important to do is to normalize those reactions that people have to these events so that they don't feel like, well, none of my other coworkers are crying about this. What's wrong with me? Why can't I handle this? So normalizing those reactions, because everyone does react differently to these experiences. So I'm going to kind of whip through some of this a little more quickly, just because I want to make sure and give enough time to talking about specifically about how we interact with people who have been in a human trafficking situation. And again, going back to my terminology, I'm using human trafficking as a short term as a sort of a shorthand term for talking about people who have been in a sex trafficking situation. We cannot forget about labor trafficking, but in my particular position, the vast majority of the people that I work with, primarily because of the new human trafficking unit, is folks that have been in a sex trafficking situation. So just to give you a quick overview, there are other types of victim advocates. There are victim advocates with non-governmental organizations, with the court system. We work with people who have been, primarily with people who have been the victims of violent crime, people who have been the victims of crimes that fall under the Victim Rights Act. And the Victim Rights Act, among other things that it does, is it ensures that people who have been the victim of a crime have certain rights under the Colorado State Constitution. Two important pieces of information, and then I'm going to move on. Number one is that they have the right to be informed, present, and heard during key stages of the criminal justice process. Number two, they have the right to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. And it's very important to do that because, again, as soon as you start treating someone in a different manner, they will shut you down. So I talked a little bit already about how I'm using the term victim. When the law talks about what a victim is, they are talking about what you and I would call a real person, a natural person. So as I read case reports, as I'm looking over them, the state of Colorado or a business can be listed as a victim, but when we're talking about the Victim Rights Act, that's not what we're talking about. So these are some of the critical stages. I talked about being informed, present, and heard during critical stages. I'm not going to go through this a whole lot. I'm happy to talk with you offline afterwards if you'd like. Here's a few more of them. All right, so this is not the entire list. This is not an exhaustive list of the crimes that are under the Victim Rights Act, but these are some of the more common ones, let's say, that we deal with. So it's everything from intentional homicides to assault to kidnapping. Domestic violence is one of the biggest ones that we deal with in this community, and there is a significant overlap between the power and control that someone uses in a domestic violence relationship and the power and control that someone uses in a human trafficking situation. So again, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, and yes, human trafficking. I'm not going to go into this, but basically our mission as a victim advocacy unit is to minimize the impact of violent crime on a person and help them move forward from that event. We work with a number of different units at the Victim Advocacy Unit, everyone from patrol to the homicide detectives to the new human trafficking unit. And we heard from Ellie earlier today. She's always an outstanding speaker. So this is the number of people who have been the victims of violent crimes that we have worked with over the last 4 years. That's year to date as of earlier in October, so that's not even up to date for 2004, but we're already over 6,000 this year. So again, we do work with a lot of folks, but again, going back to the newness of the human trafficking unit, and we saw some numbers that Ellie was talking about. when we're thinking about 6,000 people who have been the victims of violent crime, and we go back and we look at, we're right around 70 people that have been recovered from a human trafficking situation. It's a small number, but it's a very important number, and they're very intense cases, and they're like none other that we work on. So what do we do specifically when we're working with a person who's been in a human trafficking situation or who is in a human trafficking situation? Because I don't want you to feel like if you physically remove a person from a situation where they're being trafficked, that means that they have been removed from that situation entirely, because the traffickers are master manipulators. They use violence, they use coercion of all kinds, they use manipulation, mental manipulation. And so just because you physically remove someone from that situation doesn't mean that they have been removed from it by any stretch of the imagination. Working with people who have been physically removed from that situation, and they're, let's say for example, at a police station talking to you in an interview room, it's like no other case that you work on. So what we try and do is we try and approach them, again, from a non-judgmental standpoint. Very important. I even use different language. We dress differently when we go in to talk to folks who have been in the situation. I don't wear a shirt and tie. I wear jeans, maybe a hoodie, make it a little bit less intimidating to talk to a person who's been in that situation, because when they see someone from the police department, there's automatically a barrier there. Again, we're trying to empower people, and in these situations, the people that have been in a human trafficking situation or who are in a human trafficking situation do not have a lot of control over the decisions in their life. They do have some small measure of control, and some of that is a coping mechanism, but one thing that we try and do is we try and reintroduce them to the concept that yes, you do have the basic human right of being able to make decisions over your life, and we try and reintroduce them to that. So one of the questions that we ask, again, trying to leave them in the driver's seat, what do you want to do? Do you want out of the life, to use the terminology? And if they do, if they're open to that, then that opens other avenues. What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be, when you grow up? Because some of these folks that we're talking to, they are our children. So as we're assessing, actively listening to what they're saying, what they want to do with their life, we're trying also to try and come up with a plan where we can help assist them. And I will say that there are, in many situations when we're talking about trying to assist someone out of a human trafficking situation, much like with domestic violence, there is a lot of a cyclical pattern as far as you've done a lot of work to try and get someone out of this situation, and they're going to come back to it, and then you're going to see the same person again, and you're going to do a lot of work to try and get them out of this situation, but you're going to do it every time to give them the opportunity every time to get out. Because ultimately, and I say this not to put the burden on their shoulders, but to empower them, but ultimately when you are working with a person who is in this situation, it's going to be up to them when they want to get out of it. You can give them the tools, but they're the ones in the driver's seat, and they're the ones that make the decision, because they have to have the power to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful. So I know I'm out of time. I'm happy to talk to you offline about this. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions or concerns, please come see me. Thank you.